Hi, I'm Sophie. I'm a woman in my mid-20s. I have short brown hair, blue eyes, and I'm wearing a yellow t-shirt. I'm in the final year of a PhD at the University of Sheffield and I'm autistic. My research looks at autistic women's experiences of university. Last academic year, about 11,000 new university students declared a social communication disability or autism. Over the last few years, the numbers of students with declaring autism has risen by approximately 1,500 every year. These statistics do not include students who are not British or students with more than one disability. Despite the rising numbers of autistic students attending university, graduate outcomes are still very poor. Autistic people are the least likely people to be employed after university, and some statistics report that the higher your degree, the less likely you are to be employed. Research about autistic people in higher education has been increasing over the last few years, and it is imperative because if autistic people are attending university and their outcomes after university are poor, then the experience they have whilst they're there needs to be as good as possible. My study looks at giving voice to autistic women about their university experiences. 11 autistic women participated. They did not have to have a formal diagnosis to take part, and the split was approximately 5 undergraduates and 6 postgraduates. I asked each participant to create up to 3 artifacts. I define an artifact to be anything that was creatively expressed that depicted how autism had impacted them at university, so whether that was positively, negatively, or indifferent. I used these artifacts as a basis for an interview, which started off with them explaining their artifacts. And throughout the research process, I self-reflected on being an autistic student researching an autistic population. These are some of the artwork examples. On the left is Poppy's artifact. The picture shows an oval which is painted in blue and red. And on top of that oval, there is text that's white. The text shows small sentences of unhelpful comments that people have said to her about autism and her ADHD. She described the image to be showing that people didn't understand things about autism, but all the things that were said to her swirled around in her brain for her to keep mulling over, even if she knew that they were actually wrong. On the right is Katie's artifact. The background of it is in yellow, blue, red, and green. It's in splodges, and in the front is a mask. The mask has cracks in it. Her artifact is from when she went to a conference, and the background shows all the sensory experiences that were intermingling. And the mask in front is her trying to mask her autism and trying to fit in with the other people at the conference. However, when the sensory experiences got too much for her, her mask began to crack and she struggled not to hide her autism. Here are a couple of poetry artifacts that I had. On the left is Kim's poem called Concentrate. Her poem is about her being unable to work in the library. She has a stanza about each sense, and she wrote this poem because she was feeling jealous and annoyed at other students who were able to work in the library without difficulty, and other students who did things such as eating crisps that made her life difficult, but they didn't realise that they were doing anything wrong. And on the right is Jess's poem. She based her poem on the film Forrest Gump and the negative stereotypes of disability that portrayed. And she feels that she has to live with society's negative stereotypes of disability, and she feels that very deeply. So I analysed all of my artwork and interviews together to come to the findings. In order to analyse the artwork, I went through a 3-step method that is mostly documented by Susan Coleshaw's recent work on using collages as a research method, which is also summarised in Helen Cara's latest book on creative research methods. So for this, I went through the 3-step plan, where firstly, I looked at the descriptiveness of the images and the writing. Secondly, I analysed it. So for example, how the picture was composed or what writing was there, the use of space. And lastly, I interpreted it, looking at both the obvious meanings of it and how it could be read in an unobvious way. After having that analysis, I was able to put that with what the participants said in their interview about their image, and also combine that with a thematic analysis of the interview texts. This brought out 2 distinct themes, which between them have got 6 sub-themes. In the theme of perception, the sub-theme of self-perception, participants mostly said that an autism diagnosis or identity could be positive in some situations, but it could also be negative, and that they felt that they had to mask their autism to fit in to societal stereotypes and conform to how a woman should be perceived. Secondly, I asked autistic people how they felt about how society viewed them, and they thought that society don't expect women to be autistic overall, and therefore they're not given as much leeway for any social difficulties. Participants also thought that autistic people's well-being was valued much less in society, and that women were expected to conform. And then the last sub-theme in that theme is the perceptions that university have of them. And participants overall thought that if they had the grades to get to university, that the university thought they could conform with the expected norms of a university student. So for example, drinking lots of alcohol, being able to cope with lots of communication via email, being sociable, and being able to cope with the current disruption of COVID and previous disruptions of strikes without any difficulty. Specifically, my autistic women participants thought that at university, if they were an autistic man, they'd be able to get away with much more. For example, based on the media stereotype of Sheldon Cooper, and that as a woman, they are more referred to as disruptive or non-compliant. In my second theme of daily experience at university, participants found it difficult to communicate with others and to interact, particularly at conferences or in Freshers' Week, so they could make friends. But participants also raised the fact that they thought their lecturers didn't always understand them and they didn't understand them. So touching on Milton's double empathy problem. Secondly, second sub-theme of the support, participants generally thought that people were supportive at university, for example, autism mentors and autism support groups or social groups. However, in order to get support, they had to go through a lot of bureaucracy, and the university as a whole was not set up to offer autism support. It was more from individuals who were particularly keen to champion disability or willing to listen. And with regards to change, participants wanted more autism awareness and change within the university, aimed at staff and students, to ensure that people are more aware of autism, particularly in women. So overall, participants felt that the structure of university and perceptions of society and the university as a whole negatively impacted on well-being, but they felt that small changes which didn't cost that much could help them and other autistic women feel much more supported at university. Thank you for listening.